Hey, aloha, love tribe. Welcome to the show. I have somebody here with me who I think might have 8 legs and tentacles. She's an octopus and she's doing things all over the place as a mother, as the founder of Origin Wealth Advisors. She's doing Bitcoin consulting. She's an author, a podcast host, and a sweet friend and a Bitcoiner. Welcome, Morgen Rochard. How's it going, Mama?
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks again. Like we had this scheduled for a couple months ago and I had to reschedule. And so thank you for your grace with this. How's it going there, Octopus Mama?
Well, it's definitely busy as usual. It's always busy. I have got 3 young kids. My kids are 7 and under.
Oh
So
my gosh.
it's wild around here. I have permanent brain damage from lack of sleep. I
Yep.
will tell you. But they're amazing and they make it worth it, right? And so and it's really, I feel like for me what's really been amazing is that like I can spend a lot of really good high quality time with my children while also still having, as you said, my many tentacles in many other places. So I do enjoy the balance. I will say I walk a tightrope, but I do enjoy it because it gives me a little bit of everything. And thank God, like my business is such where I can really end the day early and spend a lot of good quality time with my kids in the afternoons.
That's amazing. I know. I think like what I learned as a mom, like the kids, they don't need 2 hours straight in a row with you. They need literally like a few minutes. And then it depends on what age, obviously. But as they get a little older, it's kind of like, okay, play with me for a little bit and then, okay, go away. And as long as you have like those like focused, concentrated times with them, it seems to make a big difference in their lives, and it's like, I mean, kids are not dogs, but dogs like that too, like throw the ball for them for a few minutes and then they're just like, okay, leave me alone now. I'm going to go lay down. Not that the kids do that, but you know what I
No,
mean?
I
It's
know
so,
what you mean, but they play like my kids play pretty independently, even my 2-year-old. So like my kids are 4, 7, and 2. My
oh my
2-year-old too.
gosh.
Like, I mean, other than the fact that sometimes she's doing something that's incredibly dangerous,
Right.
sometimes she's just like happy to sit there and play and she can sit there for 10, 15, 20 minutes sometimes just interested in what she's doing. So I feel like some of that is God given. And some of that is also just like having some patience as a parent and not intervening so quickly and trying to entertain your kids all the time. I
Yeah.
definitely like the more children I've had, the less involved. And I mean
I
that
know
like
each one gets a little bit
positively,
like, you can go play in traffic.
you know?
It's fine. Just don't play under the
Yeah,
tires.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
you're like but you like kinda get it right. Like every child you like become less anxious, you give them a little bit more of what they need. You're more like I feel like over time I've involved like being a mom of 3 has made me a better mom, hands down. Because like
Absolutely.
I know more and I'm actually able to be a better mom for my 7-year-old because of my 2-year-old. So like it's kind of a beautiful circle how that all happened.
It is, and it's one of those, like, I mean, I don't know about you, but motherhood completely was a like, "Oh, I didn't know it was really gonna." I read all the books, and I did all the groups, and I did talk to all these people, and then once you become a mother, you're like, "Oh, this is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be." It's more rewarding, it's more beautiful, it's more sacred, it's just like it's everything 10x,
Yeah.
and it's I would never trade anything for the world. Like that's been the best gift that I've been able to be a mom, and it's made me a different person, in the world, right? How has being a mom impacted? Like we'll talk about your about Origin Wealth Advisors and everything, but how has being a mom impacted your career, and not just career, but how has it impacted your ability to serve clients and to be somebody out there in the world who's in service?
Yeah, so I started my business before I had children. So my business is 11 years old now. My son is 7. So I got pregnant with my son. Basically, in my mind, I thought, okay, when my business turns 3, like that would be a good time to not have a baby because I like all the statistics and everything. I'm a planner. Was like, okay, like you want to get the business
We
running, and
made
then
it. We're
yeah, like
profitable.
do
Yay.
all the hard work to get the business running, and then at year 3, like things will be humming a little bit more. It'll be a little more stable, and then have your baby. The reality is that there's actually never a good time to have a baby when you're
Yeah.
running a business. But like there's also it's always a good time.
Yeah.
So like I think if I had like known now what I like now, if I had known then what I know now, then I probably would have just been like, whatever, just go for it. Like, because I feel like kids are just amazing and they change your life and like everything you were saying. I mean, like I can't imagine who I would be if I didn't have them.
Yeah.
Um, But the other hand of that is like, I didn't know that prior to being a mom. And so like, I thought I had to like align all these things and get things in place. And then what happened from there was
Oops, you just went mute
I
for a
need
second.
help.
Oh,
Oh no.
there you go. Okay.
Oh, okay, I'm so sorry. I knew I
It's
needed
okay.
help in my business, and so it was
Yeah.
or I needed help with my child, and so I was sitting there and I'm doing the math on this, and it's like, okay, I can get somebody to come and take care of my child and pay them on an after-tax basis, or I can get somebody to come help me in my business, pay them pre-tax, and then I have more time to spend with my son, and like and I would rather spend more time with my son, right? And like, you know, and start like just offloading some of the things that are just less important. That was really hard for me though, honestly, to start delegating because I was doing everything. And so
Yeah.
it seems like such a no-brainer now, but at the time it was like, oh my gosh, like are they gonna do what I want them to do, you know? And thank God I was able to find someone who's actually been with me. He's been working with me for 7 years now too. Um,
Nice.
and he's a Bitcoiner as well at this point. And like it's just like it all worked out, everything's great. But at the time, it was like it was a really big decision for me to do this, and I still needed some childcare, obviously, because like I still had to be in the business. But like my mom was around, my husband had some flexibility, right? Like we were able to like piece together childcare in a way where it felt good to me, rather than just like, okay, I'm going to dump my son at daycare and I'm going to go to
Yep.
work, and that's just going to. And like that was just that was a hard no for me. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean it's a hard no for everybody, right? It was just for me. I couldn't do that, and I haven't been able to do that with any of my kids. None of my kids. I've just been able to like drop off at a young age. It's just I just can't do it, and so and no judgment on anybody else. But that's basically like how the evolution, I think, of things started in my business is like, okay, let's start offloading. And then I went from like a part-time, you know, contractor to having Mark, who works for me now as a full-time employee. And then he from there was promoted to become a financial planner at my firm. So like he's
Cool.
really like grown also with the business, and now his wife also works with us too, so like
Nice.
they have two kids, and so like we're a family practice, right? Like we have basically a lot of young families who have kids in our practice. We do serve a lot of different age groups, but like we generally have like, you know, family core families that who are understanding, right, where we're sort of all kind of passing the ball, and they understand that because they're doing that too. So they're not like expecting this, you know, turnaround like as soon as they send an email that an hour later somebody's responding with like, you know, gigantic research about their situation. So like we have that. I think that's what's also nice about the practice is that like the people who are in my practice sort of mirror what we're doing in a way, and like that makes all of it work. I think if I were working at like you know, a Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or had like, you know, it would be a completely different story, and like
Yeah.
I wouldn't have the same kind of flexibility and everything else that I do have.
Well, it sounds like motherhood has helped you create your company culture, and family culture, right? Because you're right. Like working at these big companies, I worked at Deloitte a long time ago, and it was just like being a robot, and I'm like, these are not the droids I'm looking for. Um, but um, it's super important, because it makes you want to keep going to do your mission and your work when you feel like, yay, I'm a part of this family, this team, this group of people who've got this vision and this mission to go empower people through finance. And how did you decide, like, did you always know from a young age, like, I'm good at finance, I'm good at money, I want to teach people about money? Or like, what was your aha moment where you're like, okay, this is where I'm going to be, putting some stakes in the ground?
I think in retrospect, I should have known that. I've always been kind of obsessed with money and also like a little bit curious and like nosy, you know, like wanting to like sort of poke my nose in people's situations. And maybe that's like a fault of mine, but honestly, I've turned it into a strength of being like, I want
Yeah.
to see what's in your insurance policy, you know, and people are like, okay, fine. Uh, so so yeah, I think in retrospect I should have known. But the reality is that there's a lot of healthcare in my family, and so like in
Mhm.
my mind, I always had it that I would be a doctor. And
Oh, interesting.
so
Okay.
growing up, I always said I was going to be a doctor. And like my grandfather was a doctor, my uncle was a doctor, my dad's a dentist. Like I thought, okay, if I'm not going to be a doctor, maybe I'd be a dentist or I'll work in healthcare in some way. And so it actually took me a really long time to sort of break out of that. And it really wasn't
Mhm.
until my senior year in college, actually, that I was like, you know what, this is really not for me. Um, and I need to do something different. Along the way, though, I mean, I read like a lot of Ayn Rand in high school. My parents were Ross Perot voters. I mean, I didn't have like the typical, you know, American upbringing from that standpoint of like, you know, pick a side and stick to
Blue or
it.
red. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And after reading Ayn Rand, like I started reading this guy called Garrett Garrett because he writes like He
Garrett
writes
Gareth?
Yeah, Garrett. His name is
Okay.
Garrett. He writes fiction about Austrian economics. So like after reading
Okay.
Ayn Rand, you're like, okay, well, what's next? I read all those books, like, and so I ended up finding this guy, and then from there, he also wrote nonfiction, and so I
Mm.
started reading his nonfiction. I found that really interesting, and I found Ludwig von Mises after that, and Marie Rothbard, and then I started like the reading things on the Mises Institute's website, and just started like going down like the Austrian economics rabbit hole. All of that really kind of culminated in my senior year of college, where I was like, okay, I need to do something else. And I don't like what's being taught here at college. I thank God got a job getting guys coffee on the floor of the American Stock Exchange. That was kind of how I got my start. And then they promoted me, and I did that for a couple of years. And then it was a really big decision actually for me to leave that world and go into wealth management. But I felt like, just given the opportunities that were available to me at the time, and it was also 2010. I mean, it was a very different situation back then
Mhm.
after the global financial crisis and everything going on, like what jobs were available to young people like me at the time. And I took a job in wealth management. I regretted it immediately. Uh, I hated who I worked for. I was in Merrill Lynch. I hated Merrill Lynch. I just was like, oh, this place is the worst. And then I switched teams at Merrill Lynch, and then that team ended up moving to UBS. And that was really that was pivotal for me, I would say, because at that point I was like, all these banks are the same. I guess I should have known that. Again, like I feel like, but when you experience it, it's very different than
Yeah,
when you're actually living it. And at
yeah.
that point, I was like, okay, if I want to continue down this path, because I do like working with clients and I like what I do, I just don't
Mhm.
like where I'm doing it, then that means that I have to find some sort of other alternative. And that's basically how my business was born.
And so you like, obviously going 0 to 1 as a mother, right? Like, yeah, listen, I to get it out there. Uh,
I don't see
I'm not
it.
I'm not too embarrassed. Um, but just like going from 0 to 1 as a mom, right? You don't know until you know, right? Until you're doing the thing. And so for you, because you got your feet wet and did this whole thing, and you realize like, oh, this is the system. No matter which little institution I'm in, it's like they're part of the same. I call it the Kraken. Like this whole giant evil system is the Kraken, the beast. And so that's like really brave for you. Like, and especially since it sounds like you've got a background with a lot of your family being in medicine and not necessarily entrepreneurship. And so entrepreneurship, I mean, unless they have their own private practices,
My dad had his own business.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
rest
And
of that,
so,
we're like, yeah, we're kind of bootstrappers in a way.
yeah. And so that's really cool that you did that. And so, you know, obviously fast forwarding, let's go from like how did you get into Bitcoin? Because obviously going from TradFi, wealth management, et cetera, that's a whole nother model of how we're advising people of like, this is how you do stuff. And then here comes Satoshi. Hello. Throws
Yeah,
a wrench in the whole thing. Like how did that work out for
I
you?
read it on I saw it the first time I ever saw it was an article on the Mises Institute's website. It was a blog post. I don't remember who wrote it, but Bitcoin is like $1 a coin.
Oh
And
my
I thought
God.
that it was really interesting. I just didn't, I could figure out a way to buy it was sort of kind of the weird part about it. Cause I was like,
Uh-huh.
okay, I can like, I mean, I was a single girl in New York City, I want to go to like a street corner and do local
I
Bitcoins.
know.
That was like
Hey,
a thing. Yeah. Like
the
that's,
hoodie,
now
the
I've
dude with the hoodie on,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
like,
It's,
yeah.
like, not exactly my thing. I looked into Mt. Gox. It seemed I didn't have, like, alarm bells ringing off, like, maybe I should have again, but hindsight is 2020, but I did see that they wanted you to wire money not to your own account in Japan. And my TradFi bells sort of were like, "Oh, that's I don't know about that."
Yeah.
And so I just forgot about it. I was like, whatever. It's not really like, and I didn't think it wasn't so important to me at the time that I was like, I have to get my hands on this. It was just like, oh, that's a cool article. Yeah, if I can buy, great. But if not, like, who cares?
Right.
And then it really wasn't until 2013 when I met my now husband. So my husband's Pierre Rochard, who on the first date was literally talking about Bitcoin. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that thing where I sort of like kind of put two and two together. Reserve currency, he's like very passionate.
Wow.
And so a normal person I think probably would have been like, okay, next, but in my mind, I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. He's very passionate, right? Like he's got like, there's a lot of like good in this. And so I started looking into it too. It took me a long time though. I'm not the kind of person that just like gets struck by stuff and then sort of goes with it. I'm the kind of person that it's like, and I've used this analogy before because I feel like Bitcoiners don't always see this of like when there are people who are afraid of water or who don't know how to swim, right? You don't just like throw them off the diving board.
Right.
Yeah. Like,
Off the high dive.
so, and like, it's just sort of an analogy, right? Like, I know how to swim, obviously, but like with Bitcoin for me, it was like, okay, I had to like get comfortable. Like the first thing was like, okay, I stuck my toe in, I read an article on the Mises Institute. And then after that, like I looked into how to buy it, but it didn't seem great. And then getting my ankles in was like, okay, my boyfriend, who I think I'm probably going to marry, is really interested in this. Okay, like maybe I'll like learn about it, because that's the nice thing to do if somebody's really passionate about something and you like them. Okay. And then it was like, okay, well, I hear his podcast going on all the time in the background. Like maybe one of them is interesting, And then I was like folding laundry one day and he was listening to a podcast.
It was what you broke up there. It was who?
Um listening to a podcast and it was really, really funny. And I was like, oh, this is funny. What are you listening to? And he's like, it's a Bitcoin podcast. And I was like, okay. And I'm like folding and I'm listening. And it was super funny. And then after that, I was like, okay, I want to listen to this podcast. And so I got the podcast and I started listening to it. And it was hilarious. Like the guys were super funny. They don't have their podcast anymore. It was like Bitcoin Uncensored. So it was like a long time ago. And they just made me laugh and like it was interesting. And after that, I was like, you know what? Like, okay. Like I feel like we've been involved in this and like I own some or whatever. We were like kind of, like Pierre was a broke college student. I was starting my business. It wasn't like we had so much money to be like just buying Bitcoin or whatever. Well, he was still really passionate and we were like involved in stuff. But at that point, like my business was a couple of years old. And I actually felt like, okay, at this point, like I knew enough actually to advise on this. So that
Nice.
was kind of the turning point for me. It was in 2016 was like, I actually started advising on Bitcoin in my practice. I didn't go out of my way to recommend it to people because there was there was not clarity at all about what you could and couldn't say. But
Right.
if people brought it up, I felt comfortable and confident enough to be like, this is what it is. This is what money is, to actually like start going through it. And so like it took many years for me to get obviously where I am here today of like, I can very confidently and passionately talk about Bitcoin and financial planning and all the things. But it really, the reality is that like that started for me 9 years ago. And so in 2016, I advised my first client on it. In 2017, I advised 2 more clients on it. In 2018, another 3. And by 2020, we got pretty much almost everybody on board in my practice. So, I mean, it like, again, it wasn't like, I guess, like, I wish I had that, like, in some ways it's kind of amazing to be married to who I'm married to because he had like that instant conviction from the beginning. And he, like, that's just not like we differ in that way. Like I'm a lot slower, but once I get rolling, I'm really rolling.
Well, and that lends so much
So
credibility to you too as a wealth advisor, especially for people who are, trusting you with their life, right? I mean, because obviously this is part of like your survival, which is our money and our wealth. And so if you're just, oh, la la la, this is great. Here's the next big thing. And obviously Pierre got it clearly, and sometimes it does, it just clicks and you're like, I get it. And like, sometimes it's like, it's important the route that you take too, to just kind of like, nope, I'm going to go here and here and here. Okay, now I got it. I got it. I got it. And so you're doing this beautiful layering of intelligence around it, and conviction around Bitcoin. And I think for a lot of
yeah.
people, that feels really safe, and that feels really trustworthy. So I think that's an important way.
I will say though, like people give financial advisors a lot of crap for not being involved in Bitcoin. Like I think what you're saying really kind of mirrors what's going on in the industry in general, right? Obviously they're bad
Yeah.
actors, whatever. They're not going to get involved. There are a lot of people that would literally like, we care so much about our clients and we want to do right for our clients. And we don't want to get our clients, invested or saving in things that are absolute scams or that they're going to lose their livelihood
Absolutely.
over, right? And so like we're slow to move because like we need to make sure it's the
Yeah.
right thing for our client. And so for like everyone looks at me and they're like, well, look at you, like you're in the space and you're on like, but you see like how much time
Yeah.
it took me, right? And so like the advantage I have is that time was taken many
Yeah.
years ago. That like I was introduced in like 2012 or 2011, and then that I was reintroduced in 2013, and then that I felt a lot more conviction in 2014, 15, and then finally 16 to be like, okay, I'm ready to advise on it. Like that's a really like, if you're thinking about it, I mean, we're talking about a 3 to 5 year runway that I
Well,
had
and especially during
to
that
get
time
involved.
period too, like I'm a 2021er, and it's like during that time you didn't have all the things you have available to us now, and like all the
Mhm.
exchanges and the ease of understanding and the 5,000 Bitcoin podcasts and, the conferences that were huge, so So, I mean, I can only imagine what it was like back then for you trying to be like, hey, you did need to have that kind of due diligence in your own proof of work to feel comfortable with this. Cause it's not like, well, look, this government's, making it legal tender now and down here in South or Central America. So you didn't have that ability to have all of those bullet points to show like, yes, Bitcoin is legit. It's a valid thing for you to
Yeah.
do, So I bet your approach was, it had to be more methodical, and more thoughtful.
Yeah, and also I feel like now more than ever, we're actually at a point where Bitcoin on a risk adjusted basis is like I think is going to have what we call like the highest Sharpe ratio, so like highest return per unit of risk. And the reason why is because like risk has actually gone way down now at this point. I don't think that people see it that way because they're like it's still super volatile. Some people still think it's going to zero. There's still a lot of uncertainty, obviously, about what is going to occur and where Bitcoin is going. But if we think about like where we've been over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, it's significantly different. The risks that we were talking about 10, 15
Yeah.
years ago versus now. Now, like to me, it's more the timeline that is the risk rather than like, is this going to become a thing, right? Because to me, Bitcoin is already a thing. It's already inevitable. It already is happening. It's just more so, okay, how long does it take to become like the global reserve currency, right? And that, like, I think, there's many different outcomes on how like that could either accelerate or be decelerated
Let's
and so
talk
forth.
about global reserve currency for a second. And because, we're obviously seeing a lot of these, treasury companies popping up. We're seeing a lot of just companies putting it on their balance sheets, which is, I think, just like you have cash or bonds or whatever on your balance sheet, you're going to have certain assets. And I hope every human, every nonprofit, every company, every, anything that can have Bitcoin should have some Bitcoin in their, uh, in their balance sheet. We're seeing a lot of folks, obviously, I love Michael Saylor and appreciate all the work he's done for Bitcoin. And at the same time, when he's like, I'm never selling my Bitcoin, Bitcoin's not a medium of exchange, it's just for store. To me, that kind of goes against why Bitcoin was created as this peer-to-peer electronic cash, And so do you see what do you see the timeline looking like before we get to Bitcoin as a medium of exchange being Bitcoin and not something that's, okay, we're going to have a Bitcoin backed currency? Because to me, that's the same repeat thing that we did with gold. And so it's like, how are we going to, um, just actually get to a point where Bitcoin is being used as the medium of exchange that I believe it was intended to be used for?
Yeah, no, I love that question. I think that what people often miss about the medium of exchange part is that you can't have a good medium of exchange without a good store of value.
Right.
And
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
like, it has to prove itself that it's a good store of value in order to become a good medium of exchange. And the reason why is that if something's not a good medium of exchange, right, you're not going to want to accept it. And
Right.
so, right, if I'm running my business or you go to a coffee shop or whatever it is and you want to go spend your cash, you go to that coffee shop to go spend your cash and you're trying to give them, like stupid coin or whatever it
Monopoly
is out
money.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're like,
whatever it
yeah,
is.
no thanks. I
Then
don't want
they
this.
don't want to take it, right? And they don't want to take it because it's not worth anything. And why is it not worth anything? It's not a good store of value.
Right.
Whereas Bitcoin, right, is proving itself as a good store of value over time. And I think that over time, as a result of that, it's going to, of course, it's going to become like all of the properties of money. It's not just going to become gold because it's, it is divisible, it's fungible, it's easy, it's portable, right? There's so
Right.
many like good characteristics about it that fiat have that also Bitcoin has, in addition to all the good characteristics that gold has that also Bitcoin has. And so it's this healthy medium, I think, between the two, where eventually, yes, it will become a medium of exchange. When it becomes that on a, like, obviously it already is that, right? There are many places who are accepting Bitcoin and so forth. You can actually operate your life in Bitcoin if you really try. I don't recommend it, but you can go out of your way and do all these things to live
Yeah.
a Bitcoin life. But I do think that we're headed to a place where that's going to become more popular and more reasonable. People want to accept this over whatever fiat currency that they're
Yeah.
currently getting for their services. I know, like, I have clients or friends who they're just accepting it in their business as a way of bringing in business. And then
Mhm.
they're using it as a way to just either keep it on their balance sheet or just say, this is just going to be my savings because I was going to have an excess in my margins anyways. And so, like, right now, yeah, it's still sort of store value. But as soon as, like, things start opening up, right? If businesses are starting to accept it, maybe that also means that vendors or suppliers or whatever else, right? There's going to start to be an economy where we actually can move this around. And I just see that as a slower evolution than the store value case, because the store value is just so easy, right? You could just so buy it and instantly move it to a hardware wallet. It's like that's seamless. And yeah, for a lot of people, that's not seamless, right? There's some there's there's some friction there, but
Yeah.
in the meantime, there's a lot of easy ways to just store it. And I think that they're only going to get better from here, obviously, but the medium of exchange part is a little bit harder. And then obviously from all of that comes unit of account, right? Because people could then actually start using it as what they value everything in, rather than it just being that they keep flip-flopping between this and fiat.
Right, and I think, I agree, like, store value has to be there first, because if nobody cares about it, why would we want it to be a medium of exchange? Right now, obviously, in our country, in the United States, we have capital gains, so to use it as a medium of exchange is not, if you wanna be legit and transparent with "I sent you 100 sats," like, "Are we gonna report this, and are we gonna" I mean, it's a nightmare of reporting and accounting right now for how this works. And I just saw today, and I think it was today, it was something Thailand just they're starting like a 5-year uh I don't know, hiatus on capital gains. And
Huh.
so anything over there is, if you're in Thailand, and go spend your Bitcoin. Uh, but like, I think, one of the obstacles too, and we're seeing this with, circular economies and, all of these places around the world that are popping up where it's kind of like, cool, let's just accept Bitcoin and get paid in Bitcoin. So we're just on this kind of, semi Bitcoin standard to some degree. I was just, going for a walk with my neighbor the other day, and she's, totally unaware of, I mean, she has a little Bitcoin on Coinbase, right? And I was kind of like, well, let's help you self custody. Well, I don't know about those 12 words. They're kind of scary. And I'm like, well, you don't have to. And, if you want to be your own bank and not accidentally have like an FTX thing happen or whatever, or, have them decide to freeze your account for some reason, it's up to you, but there's always a trade-off, right, with
Mhm.
people with self-custody, as we know. Um, once you get to a certain point, are you doing multi-sig? Are you not doing multi-sig? Whatever. But I feel like, especially with women, and I've been doing this Women in Bitcoin monthly meetup down at the Denver space, which is where we were going to have you do the live stream, please come to Denver and stay with me in Boulder, and we'll do a real visit with you there, because that would be
Okay.
great. The women would
That'd
love
be
it.
great.
Like anytime, like anytime. Um, but a lot of women, they don't care how everything works. They just want to know it works. Like, I honestly, I don't know how Gmail works. I don't know how the internet works. I don't know how my phone works. I don't know how electricity works. I know if I plug something in, like, I get power. Cool. I don't need to know the AC current of this or that, and I think women get intimidated with Bitcoin. Not all women, of course, because you and I are kind of nerds, in a good, really cool way. But a lot of women and moms are just like, well, that just seems too much for me, and I just want to give the power over to the bank or whatever. Like, how do you help people in your practice, if whether they're women or not, like, start to feel confident and comfortable with Bitcoin, and not feeling like, oh, this is not for me, it's too big and scary.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this analogy has been used quite a lot, and you alluded to it as well. But like, you don't need to understand how your car works in order to be able to drive it, right?
Right.
You don't need to know the mechanics of how gas is moving, like the gas is moving in a pipe from your home to be able to turn on your stove.
Right.
Right? There's all sorts of things that we do in our daily lives where we don't know exactly everything about our computers, but yet we're still able to use them. And so I think for like to start with that as just sort of an icebreaker of like, you don't have to know everything about Bitcoin in order to be involved in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And then to just touch on the things that are relevant to that particular person. For a lot of people, it is just
Right.
going to be, okay, why is this important to me? What problem does this solve? Right? Sort of just starting from there of like what money is, why it's an issue that we have, government money that's constantly being debased, and that there are people who are, even if they're good actors, they're not God, right? They don't know everything. They're making decisions with our limited minds, and trying to do the best that they can with that. But also, right, we might still have a bad outcome even with the best of actors, right? And
Right.
then that the opposite of that could be true too. The right, you obviously get a bad actor in there that's trying to manipulate things. And so I think like for the most part, people are good. Like, I have to believe that because otherwise it would be very hard to live life. But most people are really just trying to do their best, and
Yep.
they're doing their best with the information that they have. And sometimes the information, most of the time, the information. And so, right, but all of this trickles down into our money, and we're affected by that. And so I think that that's really obvious for anyone to see, and especially for women, right? Like, a lot of us are in our households, right? We're hyper aware of what's going on in a grocery store, right?
Yep.
We're hyper aware of like what maybe the differences in childcare has been over the last 10 years. I can say even like my son, when we first had a helper come for my son, I mean, I was paying like $18 an hour for a professional nanny. Right
Wow.
now in Austin, you pay a professional nanny somewhere between $30 to $35 an hour.
Wow.
So, I mean, like, it's insane, the difference.
Yeah.
So, right, if you want like non-professional help, if you want to hire, like, I have kids that come by, they get $18 to $20 an hour, but they're kids, right? So,
Right.
like, there's a huge difference between what's going, like, and moms see that, right? we're not oblivious to it. So, like, the problem is very obvious. Just filling in why Bitcoin is a solution might be difficult depending on like what somebody's understanding of money might be and so forth. And so that's where you kind of just have to meet somebody where they're at. And then from there, help them with the things that are actually going to make a difference. Or for some people, like maybe it's just buy the ETF, right? Maybe that's enough that you just have some exposure, see how it is, and then go and buy a mix and then think about self
Yeah, totally. Um,
custody. It's
I think, it's baby steps, and I hope that anybody who's listening right now don't feel like you have to jump straight into, a cold storage solution, because that's a couple steps into to life. Uh, you're a little bit frozen. I don't know if you can see that you're
oh no,
frozen. Um, maybe
oh,
just check your gear icon.
really?
Yeah, check your gear icon and see if you're at like 1080 on video, maybe. But I don't know if it's an internet thing or a resolution thing. Um,
I've got a wired connection, so I'm
it
trying to
does? Okay.
trouble. But
Okay.
can you hear me and see me okay now?
It's
It's
blurry, but I
horrible.
don't, again, I don't, does it look fine for you
Well,
on
it
both
looks
sides?
totally normal here, but I feel badly that you're like,
Okay,
staring
cool.
at
So
me.
hopefully everybody who's watching, tell us if you can see everybody okay, but we just
Yeah.
wanna make sure everybody can hear you
Is
okay,
that
Morgan.
better?
Yeah, it's a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's a little better there. So, well, let's talk about your quick start guide, your personal finance, the book that you wrote. Like, um, tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's meant to be just a comprehensive guide to all of the aspects of personal finance. There's a little snippet in there about Bitcoin, about what it is and why it's important, but the book actually isn't about Bitcoin. My next book actually that I'm writing is specifically Bitcoin personal finance, but this was just meant to be like, okay, if you don't know what to do, you don't even know where to book off the shelf,
Yeah.
and you can start where you're at. So like the guide starts like with budgeting at the beginning. It does talk about investments and Bitcoin in there in the center, and it has all the different aspects of financial planning. So you can kind of pick it up, and you don't necessarily have to read it cover to cover. Was kind of my thought. My thought was that you can go to
Cool.
the index and you can be like, okay, this is where I'm at right now, and there's a section for me. And then obviously, like I would hope that you would want to read the whole book because there's something really in there. I think that can sort of impact most people's financial situation on every single page. But that it's somewhere where people not only get the knowledge that they need, but also the practical knowledge, and
Yeah.
also combined with some of the behavioral aspects of what takes place in people's personal financial situations. I found that basically when I wrote the book, the problem was that there were a lot of behavioral finance guides and there were a lot of financial planning guides, but there weren't the two that were like, okay, but these things they're affected by each other, right? And sometimes we make really bad financial decisions because of the behavioral aspects of what's
Can
going on
can
in
you
our life.
can you explain what that means to the audience, like, so that we understand what's behavioral finance and how we make decisions and all that? Like, just a
Yeah.
little snippet, if you
Yeah,
could.
yeah, definitely. So, like, everyone has, I would say, what's called money scripts. And so money scripts
Mm,
are sort of these things that you don't even know you're picking them up when you're a kid, but you
yeah,
end up picking them up. And so, like, for like, and then you also have like these sayings that people say, like money doesn't grow on trees, or like, turn off those lights, you're spending your
right, right, right.
spending money, right? There's like all these different things and they affect you as you're growing up. Or like, maybe you experience some sort of financial like trauma or experience where your family had money and then all of a sudden they lost a lot of money.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
vice
yeah.
versa, your family had nothing and then all of a sudden they got a lot of money, right? You're really affected by these things. Or maybe you had like an aunt or an uncle that like because they seem to have this amazing lifestyle that you didn't have. So you have some sort of money
Uh-huh.
worship thing happening because
Yep,
you're like, look
yep.
at them, they have this amazing life, but you don't really know what's going on underneath. But you see just sort of when you get these little pieces of things as you're growing up. And this is obviously in all aspects of all relationships with things, right? Like people have this with food, they have it with money, they have it with,
Sure.
just relationships in general. You see these little snippets throughout your life and they enter your brain. And then for whatever reason, you can't undo them without thinking
Mhm.
about them. You just sort of operate your life thinking like, oh, like money is the best thing in the world. If I don't have money, then I won't have anything, or I'm not worth anything, right? And that's obviously not true. Like you're worth it just because you're here. Or you have just like super anxiety about money because like your parents lost all their money. And so now you're just like traumatized by it. You have a lot of
Yeah.
anxiety and like you're saving maybe more than you should, or you don't even know, like or maybe you're not even saving properly, right? Maybe you're just like sticking fiat in a bank account and you don't know what to do. You're frozen, right? So these are like all the behavioral aspects that affect the financial plan. But the financial plan is it's just what it is, right? There's no feelings, there's no attitudes about it.
Yeah.
Right, it's like that, it's in a vacuum. It's like, oh, these are all the things that you could do if you weren't a person, you're just a machine. And then you would have a great outcome. And I often kind of laugh about this because I have people all the time who like they'll interview me to be their financial planner or whatever, and they're like, well, like what would be your best tip to optimize my finances and make sure that I'm as wealthy as possible? And you're like, okay, well, only eat ramen, live in a tiny home, save,
Cardboard box,
yeah,
food share.
90% of your income. It's like basically, but like it's not palatable what people could do to like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
obviously like some people could do that. But and that's not really the question that they're asking, right? The question that they're asking is like, okay, like for my situation, like if there's some tax things I could do, or there's some estate planning things I could do, or just like, right. And so like that's really what the book is meant to do, is like, okay, you're in this situation, you have these sort of things in your mind, you're this kind of person. You can delve into the book. I'll give you what practically is the objective thing that you should do, but also keep in mind that like you're a human being and you need to make decisions, right? And they need to be appropriate for your life.
Yeah, and I think that's something that as Bitcoiners, we see all the memes of, the people living in their box and eating the ramen, and they're like, "Am I doing it right? Am I a Bitcoiner now?" Or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's just like I think too, like you've got this array of humans, right? You've got young people with no kids, you've got young men versus young women, then you've got people who've got kids and a family, and you know, the housing situation is a big deal. I don't know about you, but once I became pregnant, it was like, okay, where are the feathers and the sticks and the things? Because I
Yeah.
need to make the nest. I need to make a nest for the baby. And there's just this weird instinct thing that comes online to just be like, I have to make, I've lived in 26 places my whole life. Like I'm a gypsy. But it's like once motherhood set in, it was like, I don't want all that disruption. I don't want all that inconsistency. And it was important to me mentally and emotionally and, spiritually to be like, grounded and have a place that I knew like, okay, I can protect a baby. Yay. Like, and it's just something that it's, I don't know, did any of that happen for you, or are you a nester? Or are you like somebody who's like, yeah, I want it? Cause some people are just like, don't own a house. Don't do that. Just rent. And, buy the Bitcoin and do all this other stuff. And it's like, but there's a trade-off for that mental health component and
Mhm.
that feeling of safety and security and stability, so obviously you wouldn't give the same advice for a pregnant woman if she wants to nest to like a 25-year-old techie dude who's like, woohoo, let's go. um
Yeah, totally. No, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head of like why financial planning is more of an art than a science, right? Because
yeah,
like when human beings come in contact with money and choices and what they're going to prioritize, right? You can't really, I mean, with the exception of things that are like legitimately just bad for people, right? Like we wouldn't be like, okay, just because you love drugs doesn't mean you should just like prioritize doing things that would end you up in a situation where you're going to overdose, right? Like, you know what I mean? So like with the exception of that, like you can't, who am I to tell somebody that like owning a home to that, like if, when a pregnant woman is nesting or so forth, right? Like your example, like should I now tell her to prioritize like growing her equity outside of her home when it obviously makes sense that they want to live here long term, so forth, right? And
yeah,
so I think again, all these things is what we do with financial planning is you just present the choices,
yeah,
you run the math on it. You should still run the math on like, okay, this is what owning a home would look like. This is what renting would look like. And you know what? Even if it's more expensive for me to own a home, it's more important for these XYZ reasons. And therefore I'm going to go for it. But go for it with your eyes wide open.
right,
Don't go for it with like, it's more important for me to own a home. So I'm not even going to care. I'm not even going to look at it. I'm just going to go for it. That kind of stuff is where people get into financial issues because basically then you're not prioritizing in a smart way. And then and also you're starting to think about other things in your budget as always being important, is kind of what I see with people. It's like, okay, the house is important. Okay, fine. But maybe the car is not so important. Or maybe like the grocery budget can move in one way or another. Or maybe the dining out budget can move, right? There's a lot, or maybe entertainment, whatever it is, travel, right? But if you have somebody who's like, I must own a home. I must have fancy travel. I must have organic food all the time. I must also drive nice cars, right? Something's got to give
Yeah.
in the budget, if unless you're making, $1 million plus a year, in which case fine. But even in these situations, we find where people like we're really high income earners and they have so much trouble prioritizing, and they prioritize everything, and then they actually don't have any savings. And it just seems like if you're in a situation where you're earning so much, you could theoretically even be retired in, 5 to 10 years, but you just put yourself on a hamster wheel. And so I like really like what we do in our practice is we show people what the outcomes would be and what these would mean for them potentially. And like that's what the book is intended to do as well, is that you can look at your life and say, okay, if I make this decision, this is how it affects me later. Versus if I make that decision, if that's a trade-off that I'm willing to make, it's like, okay, I want to own this home and I don't mind working an extra 15 years to own it, then fine, right? But don't like also then have in your mind, I'm going to own this home and like Bitcoin's going to go to $300 trillion a coin, next week, and I won't have to worry about any of this stuff. And that's where I'm like, you need to live in reality, right? Like you still need to do financial planning. And I do really feel like my mission is actually to bring financial planning to Bitcoiners,
Yeah.
instead of bring the other way around of like trying to bring Bitcoin to financial planners.
Oh, interesting. I think that's super important. And Unchained Capital, obviously, they've got a little calculator for their retirement on their site, and and they've got the different models that you can plug in of which one are you going to use, and uh, how much money do you think you want to retire with, et cetera, et cetera. And so, um, do you use, like, are you using like AI or all these new tools that are coming out, right? Like AI is insanity and I love it. And it's like, it's my friend, but I still don't know how to use all the gizmos and the gadgets, but I think about like, because like you said, there's all these little sliders and levers, right? So it's kind of like, well, okay, I'll drive a Toyota instead of a Lexus. And then, okay, we don't need to have, fancy curtains. We'll just have these blinds or all those kinds of things, so it's like when you're making these little trade-offs, it's like it's neat to have visual tools or just tools that can show you like over 10 years you would have saved this much money and bought this much Bitcoin and it will be worth this much, and so for me, like I used to go get my eyelashes done, before I was a Bitcoiner, because I was like, I want to be pretty and I like long eyelashes, and it was a luxury, but it was like it was a couple $100 a month to go do that. So now I'm like, well, that's like $2,500 a year for the last 4 years. That's $10,000. Okay, that's Bitcoin has 4x'd in the last couple of years. So I made $40,000 by not, or made 30,000. Saved the 10 um, by not going and getting my eyelashes done.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, do you do stuff like that? Because as somebody who's like, you just think, oh, well, it's just a couple $100 here, it's a couple $100 there, and you don't think it's that big of a deal. But like when you compound it over time and you show what you could have got in Bitcoin terms, you're like, oh, whoa.
Yeah, yeah. It
I'll
really
just
like
use
small
some
decisions
li-
really
some
move the needle.
L'Oreal. Yeah, that's fine.
Mhm.
I'm using the grocery store stuff. I don't care. Uh, like,
Yeah.
is that something that like, are you like playing with those kinds of tools that could like show people like if you just let go of this, once a week, fancy dinner for $300 or whatever? Is that,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, so we definitely we don't really use any of the tools outside of what we have like in-house.
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of old-fashioned. I like financial planning. So I don't like a lot of the financial planning softwares because you can't that they're giving you. It's kind of black box-ish X. And so
Oh,
I don't
okay.
like that. I like to be able to like put the numbers in and understand where those numbers are coming from and be able to replicate those numbers. And if I can't replicate those numbers and be able to explain to a client what that is, then I don't use it. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's more important of being able to show like how we arrived at this number. Because if I use a
Yep.
fancy tool and I can't actually arrive at that number in some other
Yep.
way, then is that really a number? Like, should we even be planning off of that, et cetera? So we do have a lot of things in-house for that kind of stuff, tools that have just been built over the last 11 years of my practice being built. And we definitely work with clients on these things. But also, I'm a little more old fashioned about just retirement in general. Yeah, like we can use projections and so forth, but sometimes the projections don't actually they don't actually measure what is relevant. And
Mm.
they, especially if you end up in a situation where you have some kind of sequence of returns risk, which is a fancy word for basically saying the market goes down when you retire and now you're pulling out when the market is down. And
Yeah.
so that wildly affects a plan, because basically next thing you know, you're back to work in 3 years, right? And so because Bitcoin is so volatile, the outcomes are so wide rangy that what we end up doing is when we're in a retirement situation, what we're doing is we're actually planning how to convert things to fiat in a way that gives you the runway to live through any kind of sequence of returns risk event that might happen. That's where the sort of the plan, like the rubber meets the road, I think, in planning. It's like we can use all these tools and project out, and like everyone looks like billionaires if they're really saving properly, right? But at the end of the day, right, if things aren't a steady, even if they're sort of volatile, really when you're pulling out is when it matters the most. And so we have kind of tools in house that we use to sort of mimic this for people, but really what we're trying to do is say, okay, what is needed over the next 5 years for a client? And if the market does well, do we want to basically start adding more years so that we have even more runway? Because then also you just end up with these dramatically different outcomes that where a client can really live by the plan and outlast their money. And that's what obviously is the most important thing at the end of the day. For most people, risk isn't just the value of something bouncing around. It's do I have to go back to work after you told me I've retired?
I
And
know, right, like, I'm the Walmart person with
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
the carts, right? Nobody that's not the dream for any
Yeah,
human,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
But unfortunately, some of us, I mean, hopefully nobody, but people do find themselves there because they didn't know how to plan. Um, and I do you do stuff because I know I see, certain people who you think, "Okay, you're croaking out in your 70s," but they ended up living till their 90s, and they're just it's like that guy's not going to Walmart. He's frail or, pretty fragile or whatever. So do you like do you shoot beyond what you think the expectation is of lifespan for people when you're planning this? And if so, is it like a 5 or a 10-year kind of number or
We
you're like,
plan to age 100 for everybody.
"Whoa, okay."
And it's kind of like a
Whoa.
funny joke. It's a funny joke because I've had clients be like, "Come on, I'm not gonna live that long." And you're like, "Make my day. Makes the financial planning easier if you die earlier, you know?" I mean, it's like a
You
morbid
you
joke, but it's true. It's like if you die, everything's easier actually. So and I mean that with so much love because I love
Of
all my
course. Yeah,
clients.
yeah,
But
yeah.
when people are kind of pushing back on it, yeah, how can you what are you supposed to say? It's like, okay, if I plan for you to live until you're 83,
And
then
then all of a
never
sudden
mind.
you're 90 and you're
Yeah.
like, "Okay, I've got my
Or you're
little tin cup."
84 even, and you have 1 year where you're, terminally ill or so God forbid something like that happens, and we didn't plan for that, and now all of a sudden, you're, you're basically in some Medicaid place where, we just could have planned so much better. So, I just to
Wow.
me, I'm like, age 100 makes sense. And there are people that actually live beyond age 100, and also we do talk about people's family history because the reality is that, when people do have people in their family who are living well into their 90s, it's even more important, especially in modern medicine, that we make sure we plan to 100. And sometimes even for some of these clients, we're starting to think about 110, which I know sounds crazy, but if somebody who was born in 1910 lived to be 90 in their family, and then they have a lot of people like that in their family, it's like, well, maybe if you're born in 1980, you're going to be living to who knows. So yeah.
Well, and obviously with all these longevity uh, gurus and folks who are super interested in we can extend our lifespan for the 150. You're like, I don't know if I want to be that old. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, age is just a number. It's like, what is my functionality? How do I feel?
Mhm.
Do I feel spry and youthful? And am I independent? Am I able to take care of myself in all the different ways? Am I a burden on my family? I never want to be a burden on my family, And so I think it's really age is a quality. It's not necessarily just a number. It's like some people I know I
Totally.
love watching those videos. I don't know. I zone out once in a while on YouTube and I'll watch like, a happy cat video or uh the golden buzzer on America's Got Talent. And then sometimes I'll watch like the people who've lived to 100 and what are their pieces of advice. And it's always
Yeah.
just like, chill the fuck out, like you don't have to be super hyper, like surround yourself with cool people, dance, go be in nature, have a glass of wine and, get some rest. And if you have a partner, have some sex, and you're just like, wow, that's good advice. I love hearing that. What, do you help? I want to just keep going into the financial planning with, women, obviously, and families. Like when you're doing your practice, because I'm starting to work with this orphanage down in El Salvador called the House of Life. And, they've got pregnant teen girls. And so we've got them set up on, how the orphanage is set up on a cold card. They're doing SAP accepting payments, etc. And our goal is to, 4 stages is like rescue, rehabilitate, skill development, and then a safe place to live. Right. But during that process, it's like, how can we support the kids? They're doing Me Premier Bitcoin down there at the house. Um, we want to start thinking about like, how do we set these girls up who are minors with wallets so that when they are old enough, 18, 19, when they're ready to go be on their own, they have like a tiny nest egg from their chores or from donations or from the farm stand or whatever they're doing. Um, and I've been looking at a couple alternatives of, Lightning Piggy. I don't know if Lightning Piggy. So
Mm-mm.
Lightning Piggy, let's find Lightning Piggy. Lightning Piggy, yay. Um, it's an open source project and they're creating like little digital displays for kids with the 3D printed, like it can be a pig or a mermaid or whatever. And then the kids can see how much Bitcoin they have. So
Oh,
it's
that's
like,
cute.
oh, grandma sent you some Bitcoin or you did some chores and, so you can see your whole thing. Um, because I think obviously you've obviously got, very young children. How are you helping young families with kids start to understand, financial planning and Bitcoin, not just Bitcoin, but, does that come into play to like educate them on this?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely depends on the family. Some families have wanted more input than others. Some families haven't really wanted any input. I have a lot of clients who have kids like around the same
Mhm.
ages as my own kids, and so that's been really helpful because I don't actually feel like as a mom's like my child is the oldest is 7, right? Like I don't really feel like I know that much about how to educate a 19-year-old or a 17-year-old, right? Like it's a different
Totally.
story of like, what sort of it resonates with them versus like my 7-year-old, obviously like my 7-year-old's been living in it forever. So like, he already knows that like the government messes with your money and he knows what inflation is and he knows like he knows about also what it says in the Bible about honest weights and measures, right? Like we teach these things at home.
Mhm.
And so like it's trying to like give these life lessons though, but then expand them out to an older age
Yeah.
range is honestly like I feel like I'm happy to do it and to give tips and to help, but also at the same time it's like okay, at some point the parent has to step in and say that they know like what's best for their child and that I can sort of give some education around that, around how the parent can be talking to their child about it. But ultimately, like I think at that point, given that I don't have that age group,
Yeah.
like I am actually leaving the onus on them. What I will say though is what we've done in our household and what I've seen works with families who have responsible kids that are older ages than my own kids
Aw.
is that you have to give kids responsibility. And we live in a
Yep.
time where like responsibility has never been more important and that there's never been less given to children
Seriously.
than right
Yeah.
now. And in all honesty, it's not even like any family's fault or even children's fault, right? They go to school for a really long time all day. They have a lot of homework. Kids are involved in a lot of activities. There's a lot of pressure on children, depending on like where, what family you're in or where you are in the world. A lot of pressure on these kids to go to college, like as young as my son is, where the parents are already talking about like the things that they need to do when they're 7 so that when they're 18, they get into a good school. The pressure of like how sports went from something that was just sort of fun and that you can like be engaged in to like something that's like all consuming. I looked into swimming in Texas for my son because he's really interested in it. They wanted, like, at his age, he was, like, 5 at the time, they wanted him to practice 4 days a week, and there was a meet every
Oh my
Saturday.
god.
I'm
Like,
like,
he's 5.
"He's 5."
He just got
Yeah.
out of diapers 2
I
years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, "Okay." Also, we're Jewish, we're Shabbat observant, like, I'm not doing anything on a Saturday, like, that's a hard no. And, like, 4 days a week? Are you kidding? You know what
Yeah,
I mean? So, like, there's stuff like this where you're like, "Okay, kids have, like, all of this other
yeah,
responsibility, but they don't actually have real life practical responsibility." And so what's really important right now for kids is that as much as you can to start prioritizing, like, something so simple as, like, helping them learn how to make 2 things in the kitchen,
totally,
like, and not just, like, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, like, have them help them make, like, pasta and eggs, like simple things. Help them clean up around the house, like, help them learn that, like, they have to do different things, that they to learn to be resilient, that you're not always gonna be there to step in. Or if you have, like, multiple kids, right, to make sure that, like, they can do conflict resolution
totally.
amongst themselves, not always intervening and being like, "You're right, you're wrong," whatever, whatever parents do, right? Like, giving them the opportunity to work these things out because, like, the reality is that, like, the home is the place where they should be able to learn all of the skills that they need to actually survive in the outside world.
Yeah.
And I, as a parent, should not to intervene. Like, my greatest hope is that, like, when my son is 23 and he's working a job, that he doesn't call me because he wants me to call his boss about some problem he's having. You know what I mean? Right? Like, that would be horrible.
No.
You hear stories about this, about parents literally being like, "I'll call your boss for you."
Do you think, like, like, we look at, like, the 4th turning, right? And what is it? Strong men make good times make weak men make bad times, bad times make strong men. Do you feel like that cycle applies to families and culture? Because what I'm seeing in our world, right, is we see these helicopter parents versus, like, my parents. I was born in 1970, and it was just basically like, come home when it's dark, but you're not allowed to come home till it's dark. Get out, like,
Yeah.
leave. And it was like, okay. And there's no cell phones, there's no GPS trackers, there's nothing. It was just me and my bicycle in the neighborhood. I got lost sometimes. I had strangers have to call my parents and get me home, and just random shit that, like, would be unthinkable today. You're just like,
Yeah, like
oh
your
my
parents
gosh,
used to do. It's all
and
yeah, my
so
parents now.
it right? And so it sort of feels like in the macro and the micro units, right? It feels sort of like that's what's been going on because, like, a lot of parents, in these different generations are like, I want to be your friend, instead of I'm going to be your parent and let you fall down and pick yourself up instead of, this coddling. And so I think we've got a lot of entitlement going on in our culture with the younger generation. And I don't blame them for it. I think, we've got social media on top of everything, in addition to just the, I think every single family, and I don't know about you, but I think most mothers are like, I want to give my kids a spiral upward of my life. I hope that what I can offer them is better than what I had. Not that what I had was horrific or anything; it wasn't perfect, but most parents want to give their kids a better life, right? And so, but we forget it's like kids grow because they struggle sometimes, just like your muscles. You go to the gym, you have to go put some pressure and split your muscle tissues apart so that they can, like, grow. And so sometimes kids need to be um, tested with that resilience, right? Like you said, like, you don't want to always have to intervene and be like, meh. Um, but it's hard sometimes because you want to have peace and everything. You want it to be all nice
Mhm.
and nice, but it's like,
Everything should be nicey nicey, but not so much that your kid doesn't learn about any frustration in their life. Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean,
yeah,
like, frustration is good. I think that kids need to work through that stuff. I think that, yeah, we do live in a time where things are so easy that, like, yeah, it would be easier. Like, I'll give this example. I mean, it's kind of a silly example, but we were in Disney for a couple of days with our kids. My daughter's obsessed with Elsa. Obsessed. So we're like, okay, I look at it and there was no way to, like, skip the line. Even if we paid for it, you had to wait in line. It was 85 minutes.
oh my
We stood in line for 85 minutes. There were other parents there that gave their kids phones or whatever. I was not gonna give her my phone. Like, I'm not gonna, like, she gets to have a phone just because so yeah, she complained about it and she whined about it and she said, "Look at all the other kids that are doing it." But the reality is, like, in addition to not wanting to give her that was also that I also didn't want my phone to die. So there was and I didn't have, like, a charger or anything else. Like, maybe, like, if I had a backup charger, maybe I might have caved. But at this point, I'm like, I can't, like, my phone cannot die. We split up from your dad and your brother. Like, we are doing this, and like, we're just gonna stand here and wait, and we're gonna play I Spy, and we're gonna play like how many colors are in the room, right? We're gonna do all the things that I did as a kid because like
Yep.
that's what we did when we were bored. We didn't just like stick a screen in front of our faces because it was convenient. And so I do feel like while it is a lot easier and more convenient, that like kids need a break from these things.
Oh
And
my God.
and,
Yeah.
like, I need a break from it too, you know, it's like, I don't wanna like, I stare at a screen all day because that's what I do for work, but, like, you know,
Yeah.
I kinda wanna detox from the screen, and the kids, the difference is, like, it's like it really is like drugs for them, you know, and so
Well, it is a drug for us too. It's a
yeah.
dopamine thing. And
And
so
so it's
it's
like
like, oh,
separate
cool.
this child from the drug, you know, like give them a break. It's kind of like that's how I see it. And so like when my kids go to school and like they don't have any basically no screen time, or if they do, it's like, you know, like a 10-minute Hebrew video. So like they don't get very much there.
Yeah.
And they get like very little at home as well. Like they have certain days that they're allowed to watch TV or play a video game, assuming that they've done all their chores and stuff, right? So it's like setting these parameters and giving your kids some sort of responsibility and resilience around that, and then adding on top of that as they get older things like what it means to save, what it means to give charity, what it means to spend your money. um,
Okay, this is perfect. This is a perfect segue. I know we're kind of a little past the hour here, but so I have a question for you. So, um, okay, so we understand, financial literacy for kids and for adults, right? Different for a 7-year-old who wants to have a lemonade stand to the 15-year-old who's out there mowing lawns and talking to humans, whatever, or a babysitter. Um, and I think it's super like, at this stage, right? Because we're dealing with the fiat system versus Bitcoin, right? I remember when I went to my ex-husband's sister's house for the first time, like, 25 years ago when we first were together. And she gave her like 10-year-old kid her credit card. And he goes downstairs and I'm like, what the hell are you doing giving your son a credit card? He's 10, like he's going to go buy a ticket to Aruba and, whatever, She's like, he's going to go buy some points for his video game. And I'm just like, that's nuts, and it's attached to your bank account. And so it just felt like there's got to be some kind of, and this was, certainly before Bitcoin was made. Um, I'm like, what if we had like a debit card kind of thing for children that, kids could, only spend at certain websites, and the parents would predetermine like you can shop at the Disney store, whatever. Um, but then I was like, well, okay, that's fine. But then how do you teach kids about saving and investing and donating and education, and short term versus long term, so financial planning 101, right?
mhm,
Um, so I kind of came up with this little model, and I think we can do it with Bitcoin and Lightning Piggy, and Lightning Splits is, if you've got just basic stuff, if you have like, anytime you get money for your allowance or anytime you get money for, grandma sends you something for your birthday or whatever, if it goes into these 5 buckets, and I call them the 5 discs: donate, invest, spend, college, and save. And so, um, then you get financial planning meetings with your parents every quarter, and then you could have like a little interface that's like, okay, like on the old equalizers that had like the little, uh, okay, this is up this high, and it's different colors. So you can have a visual representation of where you are in your, um, your goals or your budget kind of thing.
mhm,
But like, if you're like, okay, every time I get money into this one wallet, Lightning Splits will put it into these 5 buckets, and 10% goes to saving, you know 30% goes to invest in Bitcoin or whatever, you want to invest in. um, 10% goes to donate for save the koala bears, and then having something for, oh, this is my ice cream account because I like ice cream every week. That's your short term. Oh, I'm saving for a bike. That's a $300 thing. And so then your family gets to start talking about financial literacy together. And then you can see each other's little charts, or little, displays. And then anytime, little Johnny says, well, I'm not going to get ice cream this week. I'm going to put that into my donate bucket. And then you, as a mom, and everybody in your family gets a notification that says Johnny decided not to do a short term thing. He wants to go meet his koala bear goal or whatever it might be, or his thing. And then little sister's like, well, I want to help. I'll give him my ice cream money this week because we want to see the koala bear saved. Think about the conversations that could be had in families when we bring financial literacy to the kitchen table instead of, oh, don't talk about it. I did not grow up talking about money, money, politics, and religion. Like, you don't talk about that stuff. So, I think Bitcoin offers an interesting solution, for teaching kids financial literacy in this century, in a different way that we wouldn't have had. And then, are you familiar with Maria Montessori?
Mhm.
And so, you were talking about different responsibilities and, like when you're 3 years old, you shouldn't be putting knives on the table, but when you're 5, you can handle that,
Mhm.
and da 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 da, right? And so integrating into that kind of 5 discs model, it's kind of, here's where your chores are, and you can make it fun and gamify it. And, the kids can, yes, you have to do all these things and you're not getting paid for stuff, but above and beyond, here's a little extra thing, and whoever picks it gets to have, the Bitcoin or whatever. I think there just seems to be so many neat ways that we can utilize these interfaces that we have, with Bitcoin, teaching financial literacy for women, for families, obviously for, you know, um, for the guys. We love you guys. But I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, have you seen anything out there with, like, in the financial planning world that is supporting kids on their journey for becoming, sovereign financial individuals?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of just an old-fashioned family meeting. Definitely not as exciting as what you've described, but I mean, for my young kids, basically, we have them where they earn money through chores.
Mhm.
My son does a lemonade stand, and if his sister helps, then she gets some of the money. Our
Yep.
baby's too young, obviously, to do these things, so they're like they could theoretically earn $1 a day if they do all their chores. They don't
Cool.
always do all their chores, so they never earn $1 a day.
Yeah, yeah.
At most, they earn $4 a week. I'll be honest. So they
But,
do their best,
that's
right?
good,
And
that's good.
and
That's a more
yeah.
than 50% ratio of
Yeah,
them
there you
doing
go.
good
They
stuff.
have a check mark system, and basically the way that it works is they get money and we give it in fiat because it is easier. I do think it does help kids to learn with money when they're young about
Yeah,
what they can touch and taste and feel. Um,
totally.
and so like them getting like I go to the bank and I get, $40 worth of singles, and then I basically get dole out the singles and change and everything else that they have.
Yeah.
And we do that every single week. And basically every 1 to 2 months, we sit down and we assess what's in the piggy bank and of what they've earned and what they
Cool.
worked so hard. And at that point, we are like, okay, 20% of this has to go into savings. 10% of this has to go to charity. Tzedakah is what we call it. And from there, then whatever they want to do with the rest, that's up to them. They could literally go do whatever, right? So,
Cool.
and I'm a big proponent of that like they need to learn the hard way that when they spend their money on things, like if they buy something that's going to break, that's their problem, right? Like
Yeah.
I can tell, like they can ask my opinion about it. I can tell them what I think, but ultimately, like I actually think that the best lesson is that they do buy something terrible and that they learn that they should make better decisions with their money rather than parents trying to direct them in the right place.
Yeah.
But that said, though, like the basics of save 20% should always be there. And in my opinion, the basics of giving another 10% should also be there.
Yeah.
Um, my son, when he went, and they actually go and they take their physical dollars to a store and they spend because they're at an age where they can do it. Obviously, it gets a little more complicated when they get older, and like that's maybe when you would want like the debit
Right,
card.
yeah, and it's, like, age appropriate for,
Mhm.
at my kids are 17 and 19 now, and even 2 years ago, I would, try to give them their allowance in cash, and they're like, "Mom, we don't want cash. We want you to Venmo us money." And I'm like, "But cash, you can go." And they're like, "Mom, we don't use that," So it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah, they don't use it. And in
yeah,
fact, that's what we found is that we've gone to like Barnes and Noble to go buy toys because they have like toys and books there. And my kids go and they run around, they get whatever they want, and they go. And then literally, this lady was like, "I have to count this." It was like 100 singles, 50 pennies. She's like,
you're like, "Dump it out. Here you go.
yeah,
Here's your
yeah.
piggy
She's like,
bank."
"This is not cool. Can you just give me your credit card and you take it?" I'm like, "No, like this is
No.
part of the experience." My son came with his bag of money and he's gonna count it and pay you. Like this is part of it. So I get why that would be like unreasonable when they get older, but also like the thing stands about the
But
family
yeah,
meeting. Right? When you meet with your family, like it shouldn't just be about finances, but finances should be a part of it. But it also
yeah,
should be that we give kids the ability to make choices about things that they can make choices about, right? Like
yeah,
obviously they're not going to make a choice about like which week of the year you take a vacation, right?
yeah,
Maybe they don't even make a choice about what two places you might be deciding between. But if you're not, if you pick two that are within your budget or whatever, and like it wouldn't hurt you to have your kids decide which one, or once you've picked the place to help them, like, okay, we have a budget of this much, like, why don't you choose the activity that we're going to do on
Oh,
this day or that day, right? Giving
yes,
them
yes,
choices and
yes.
helping them sort of decipher about like what is meaningful and what isn't is going to involve them more. And then I know families where they literally say everything about their finances to their kids, which I don't know from an age appropriateness standpoint if that actually makes sense. And then other families where like they sort of piecemeal, okay, this is what the kids need to know, this is what they don't need to know. And then lastly with Bitcoin, right? Like my kids have Bitcoin. That's when they save their fiat then in Bitcoin. So like it
Yeah.
gets removed from their piggy bank. They don't have that anymore. And then they have it in their Bitcoin wallet. And so like they've even gone around school and told their friends that they own Bitcoin. And so I had like a teacher ask me about it. I'm like, okay. So like your kids are going to run their mouths, I guess is what I'm saying here. So like you need to be mindful about what you do and don't tell them. And you also don't want
Of
them
course.
to start telling them, oh, you need to keep secrets about these things. But you do also want to like have them be mindful of like what is something that the family shares versus what is something that the public should know.
Totally. I think that's so important. And I know like money is such like you said, do you know who Lynn Twist is? She wrote The Soul of Money.
Oh no, I haven't read that one.
Okay, you will love her. I can just tell because you were talking about behavioral finance earlier. She's, was just, yeah, read The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. It's such a great book. And she just talks just about this literally like the purpose of money isn't just to get things. It's to have this lifestyle. It's to create impact. It's to have, a legacy. It's all of it's not just numbers in an account,
Mhm.
which a lot of, that's fun. It's fun to play the numbers game and yay, look, cha-ching, it went up, like everybody likes to feel that way, but then it's kind of like, well, now what? What now?
Yeah.
What do we do,
Well, and like obviously, like nobody wants that for their kids that they live this like materialistic, non-meaningful life, right?
Yeah.
And like we don't want that for ourselves. And
No.
so I think like part of it is that when you want to live a meaningful life in general, and and the way to do that right is to make the world a better place.
Yes.
And you can make that world a better place in many different ways. There's going to be a lot of different paths for people to do that. Like I believe that the creator put each and every single one of us on earth for a specific mission in a
Yeah.
specific time, in a specific place, in a specific family, in a specific body, right? All of those things. And so like my kids were entrusted to me to
Yep.
teach in the way that God knows I can teach them, right? Just like your children were entrusted to you for that. And so when
Yeah.
you have all that in mind of like, okay, God's running the world, I'm here to just do the best that I can. And also God doesn't need like 20 of me, right? He only needs one of me. And
Yep.
so like what do I need to do? That doesn't mean that like Val needs to do that too or anybody else, right? Like we all have these different missions on earth, and imparting that to your children that they're important and that they matter here and they matter in this place and this time is like what's going to help them make better decisions, I think, because ultimately when they internalize that, right, then it's not about just accumulating more stuff. Yeah, when they're young, like obviously they want toys or whatever it is that they want. But like, they see the toys break or whatever it is, right, that they move on, they have different interests, and they can learn from that. But like if you keep planting the seeds along the way, then ultimately like let them make whatever bad decisions that they're going to make, keep planting the information, right? Only build and move them when they're doing something that's dangerous or really harmful or whatever it is that you need that to like, recircuit them to like go in the right direction. But ultimately, like, I really do think that like, having a gardening approach with your children is going to work a lot better than, telling them like, this is what you have to do with your money. And I know because it doesn't work even with adults, right? When people come into my practice, that like when you give them like specific recommendations, that most people don't want that, right? For like the one person that comes in and they really wanted to hear what Morgen Rochard had to say, like they're excited. But most people are like, yeah, they're kind of like shaking their heads or whatever it is about it. And so it's more about planting the seeds, giving options, showing trade-offs, like helping kids like and adults really decipher between like every decision point is a trade-off and a teaching moment. And so you just have to decide if like in that teaching moment you're going to actually be the teacher or if you're going to let the lesson be the thing that they learn in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice, Morgan, because you're right. Like whether it's adults coming in to get financial advice, whether it's a kid coming and saying, should I get this toy versus this toy? It's kind of like, well, here's the trade-offs and the pros and cons, and you get to make the choice, and it I mean, life, we only learn through experience. Like like we were talking about motherhood in the beginning of the show. Um, and it's tough. I know as a mom, like since my kids have become, older and teenagers, like I remember my friend, he was like, once the kids become teenagers, you kind of, you graduate into more of a coach mode than mother mode. Cause when they're between 0 and 5, you're in like, don't let them die.
Yeah.
Like, don't let them lick the electric socket or fall off
Mhm.
the stairs or whatever the heck it is, and so your brain, you're always oriented towards, I mean, I was oriented towards don't let the kid die. Um, you
For
which,
sure.
you're doing obviously more stuff, but it's not as relaxing. I'm sure when, with your 7-year-old, it's a different
Mhm.
vibe than obviously with your 2-year-old. Um, and so it's kind of
And my
like we
2-year-old.
have this evolution of right, this this evolution as we go. And so I think it's an important way to think about money too. And I know for me is I'm still, I consider myself a newbie. Um, but I'm so excited about Bitcoin, and I'm always like, "Oh, look, that you guys, there's the world's on fire. Here's a bucket of water. Like I have the solution. It's going to be great." And they're just like, "Go away, psychopath." You know. So it's just kind of like, know your audience, like you said, like when people come to see you, like what are their pain points? What are the things that they're really struggling with? And listening more than I think sometimes talking is important. So, okay, so um, I want to make sure you got everything out that you would like to say to the women and the families and the humans who are listening. Thanks everybody for whoever's listening right now. Um, any last thoughts that you think people should understand about yourself, what you're doing, about Bitcoin, about motherhood?
Yeah, I will say that if people are listening to podcasts like yours, or they're reading up about what they're supposed to be doing, or they're trying in any way to better themselves, then they're already on the right path. I feel like it's a lot easier to bring ourselves down in these moments when we don't feel like we're doing it perfectly, especially as a mom. I know I do this to myself. Like, I can be really disparaging about the decisions I made, or how I
Yeah,
wasn't patient in that moment, or I don't know enough, or whatever it is. But the fact that, like, you're trying and you're growing and you're trying to do better is so much better for your children than you even know. And so I just want to give that, I guess, as parting advice, that, like, yeah, you're not going to know everything. You're never going to know everything, right? In general, like, there's such a vast world of things to know and do, and like, and ways to grow, right? And that's kind of the point of life, is that we don't know it all right now, that it
yeah,
is a journey. And like, as long as you're going up on that ladder instead of, deliberately going down. And I say deliberately going down because I don't mean like you slipped and you fell down a few rungs and then you're starting to climb back up, right? Like, these things happen. But if you're just deliberately trying to go down, that's a different story. But most of us are not doing that, right? Most of us are
yeah,
really trying our best, and we're trying to go up the ladder, and we're trying to do right for our families, for our, for our careers, for our husbands, for, for our families, whether it's children or aging parents or siblings, whatever it is, right? We, like, that's who we are, who women are in general, right? It's like we go out of our way to help and try to, like, make the world a better place through our families and so forth. And so I just, like, I hope that that's encouraging, especially because, like, Bitcoin could be overwhelming and challenging, and finances in general. Like, take your time. You've got time. You're gonna be okay. Like, do your best. Spend less than you make, right? Yeah, right away. You're in a good shape just by doing that. So it's like, start with baby steps. Start small, and then hopefully the ball will keep rolling down the hill and picking up steam, and eventually you'll be like an avalanche, moving things. But if you want to find me, I'm at Twitter. I'm on X. It's at Morgen with an E Rochard. I have a financial planning practice. It's Origin Wealth Advisors. That's originwa.com. My Bitcoin consulting practice is moneyowners.com. My book is the Personal Finance Quick Start Guide. You can find that on Amazon. My husband and I run a podcast called Bitcoin for Advisors. It's on all the podcast channels. And I'm currently writing a book, Bitcoin Personal Finance. If you want to get updates about that, you can go to bitcoinpersonalfinancebook.com. And I think that's it. I have some old Money Owners episodes that are still out there if you want to hear just like kind of personal finance stuff. But I don't really run that podcast anymore. So yeah, thanks for having me. This has been so
yeah.
fun.
This has been incredible, and you're a wealth of information. I wish we had 10,000 more hours to talk, but I'm so excited to know you, Morgan, and I'm glad I got to meet you in person on New Year's Eve. That was cool. Uh,
Yeah, same here. Same here. This is really fun. Honestly, I feel like I don't normally have conversations about motherhood and money. So definitely a different conversation for people
yeah, and
to
I
listen
think
to than my usual.
Well, and I think it's super important, like in your wrapping, your closing comments, is kind of ties into where we even before we hit record, but like we're so overwhelmed. Like I said, I started off with you being an octopus, right? With all these things going on. And so I know a lot of folks who are listening can relate to that very much, and so the idea of going and learning about Bitcoin and finance on top of everything that's already there, and you've got vomit on your shirt and your boss is yelling at you and you're trying to sleep and you can't, and the whole thing, and you're like, go learn about this thing. And it's like, please don't ask me to do anything else. And your advice was really encouraging because it's just step by step, right? You can listen to podcasts, you can do all of these different things while you're taking the kids for a walk with your earbuds or whatever it might be. There's little micro things that you can do to like move yourself forward. So you're not going to eat a whole burrito in one bite. I mean, I hope you're not, because that would be very scary. Um, but yeah, but thank you so much. Are you going to any conferences the rest of the year? Are you going to be out and about?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I
We'll keep
know
you
you're busy. Your mom. I know. I'm
posted.
Me too. So, thank you again so much. And everybody, make sure you follow Morgan. I'm going to have all the show notes and stuff with all the links and everything for her and her book. Make sure you pick up her book. And we're excited to have you on board, Morgan. And I get to be your friend in the Bitcoin journey. Yay.
Thanks so much for having me, Val. It's really fun.
All right. You're welcome. Aloha, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. And thanks again for tuning in.